She thought the baby shower would be the start of something beautiful, a bridge between generations, a moment of family. Instead, her phone lit up with a message that cut deeper than any silence. Stay away from my baby shower. No explanation, no kindness, just rejection. But what her daughter didn't expect was how a mother's quiet presence and one gift left behind would unravel years of buried hurt. Why would a daughter shut her own mother out on such a day? And what secret, inside that unopened box, could break the silence holding them apart? The kitchen light hummed above her, its pale glow spilling unevenly across the counter where her phone rested. She had left it there while rinsing a plate, the sound of a notification sharp against the quiet of the house. Her hands, wet with dishwater, hesitated before she reached for it. She dried them slowly on the towel at her side, as if delaying the inevitable would somehow soften whatever waited for her on the glowing screen. When she finally picked it up, the message was already there, its words stark and unforgiving. Stay away from my baby shower. No greeting, no explanation, no softening words around the edges. Just a command, as final as a slammed door. She read it once, then again, her thumb frozen above the glass. The world around her did not change. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of the wall clock, the last drip of water from the faucet, but something inside her shifted. It was as though a curtain had fallen, cutting her off from a place she had once been welcome. Her first instinct was to type back, to ask why, to plead, perhaps, or to explain what needed no explanation, that she was her mother, and mothers belonged in the moments when daughters stepped into new chapters of life. But her fingers never touched the keyboard. They hovered, trembling faintly, before retreating to the cool surface of the counter. She let the phone rest there again, the words still burning from its glow. The silence that filled the room was heavier than any reply she could have given. She leaned back against the sink, her eyes closing briefly, as if shutting out the message would erase it. But the words remained behind her eyelids, etched in a clarity that would not fade. Stay away. The chair at the table drew her eye next, the one her daughter used to sit in when mornings were louder, when cereal boxes and laughter had filled the air. She remembered her bent-over homework, hair falling in loose strands across her face, or the way she tapped her spoon against a bowl, absent-mindedly when daydreaming. That chair had been empty for years now, but tonight its emptiness seemed sharper, as if the message had carved it deeper. She sat down heavily, her phone still in her hand, staring at the screen long after it dimmed. The lock screen returned, her reflection faint against the black glass. She saw herself not as she imagined, but as she was, lines creased deeper at the corners of her eyes, her mouth drawn tighter from years of words left unspoken. She thought of the gift in the closet upstairs, wrapped and waiting. She had tied the ribbon only yesterday, smoothing it until it lay perfectly across the paper. She had imagined the moment her daughter would open it, imagined her smile. That vision had been fragile, but it had carried her through the long evenings when loneliness pressed too close. Now the vision crumbled under two words that stripped her place away. The phone buzzed once more. She snatched it up quickly, heart pounding, but it wasn't another message from her daughter. A promotion, an automated reminder from a store she rarely visited. She set it down again, her chest tightening at the thought that one message was all she would get. She stood and moved through the kitchen, her steps restless, her fingers brushing across counters she had cleaned countless times. She paused at the doorway, staring into the dim living room where shadows pooled in the corners. The silence followed her there too, not comforting but suffocating. She returned to the phone eventually. She unlocked it, staring again at the words. She considered responding. She typed out a single letter, "Why?" then deleted it before it could linger. Her daughter's message had not invited questions. It had been final. To answer it would be to break the silence, she suddenly realized, was all she had left. So she sat there, phone in hand, staring at the command that had reduced her to an intruder in her own daughter's life. The kitchen clock ticked past another minute, the sound punctuating the stillness. And still, she said nothing. Still, she did not reply, because some messages could not be answered. Some doors, once closed, could not be pushed back open. And her silence, steady and unbroken, carried more weight than any words. She could have sent back across the distance. The chair at the head of the table had always belonged to her daughter, not because anyone had declared it hers, but because habit had claimed it over the years. When the house was full of life, when mornings began with hurried bowls of cereal and afternoons ended with quiet suppers, her daughter had chosen that chair without thought. It faced the window, catching the best of the morning light. It stood at the angle where she could see both the kitchen door and the television in the next room. A small choice, but one that turned into routine, and eventually, into ownership. Now, years later, the chair was still there. The cushion was slightly worn. The wood scratched in places where restless hands had carved absent patterns during long evenings of conversation. But the chair was empty, and emptiness had weight. The mother stood in the doorway of the dining room that evening, her arms folded across her chest. The message still lived in her pocket, glowing like an ember she couldn't smother. Every time her hand brushed against the fabric of her skirt, she felt it there, silent but insistent. Stay away. Her eyes drifted to the chair. She had avoided looking at it most days, training her focus instead on the other seats, the dishes, the tablecloth, that needed changing. But tonight, she couldn't avoid it. The chair was more than a piece of furniture. It was memory made solid. She remembered her daughter at 12, elbows planted firmly on the table, chin resting in her palms as she announced she was going to be too grown up for bedtime stories. She remembered her at 16, slouched, low eyes rolling as arguments over curfews filled the air. She remembered her at 20, leaning back with laughter, spilling out as she shared her plans, her future, her dreams. The chair had held them all, every version of her daughter except the one that existed now. Somewhere else, far beyond reach. The silence of the room pressed against her. The refrigerator hummed faintly in the distance. The clock ticked steadily, but they were only background noise. The real silence was in that empty chair, a silence that told her she had been replaced, erased, cut out of the circle that had once been hers. She pulled the chair slightly away from the table, the scrape of its legs harsh against the floor. She sat down, her hands resting on the cool wood of the table's surface. For a moment, she tried to imagine she was her daughter, that she could look out the window the way she used to, that the laughter would return if she just closed her eyes. But the illusion cracked quickly. She opened them again to find only her own reflection faint in the darkened glass. Her hands tightened around the edge of the table. She thought of the baby shower balloons, gifts, the excited voices of family gathered together. She pictured her daughter surrounded by people who had received invitations, people who would sit in chairs pulled close to hers while she unwrapped presents, every seat filled, except the one that belonged to her mother. The thought carved deeper than the message itself. She would not be there. Her chair, both in this house and at that celebration, would remain empty, and that emptiness would speak louder than any protest she could make. She rose slowly, pushing the chair back into place. She smoothed the tablecloth, her fingers tracing over the faded floral pattern, grounding herself in the task. It was something she could control, unlike the space that now separated her from her daughter. For a long time, she stood there, staring at the chair, as though waiting for it to fill. But it never did. It remained steady, unyielding, and in its stillness it reminded her of the truth she had been trying not to face. She had been asked to vanish from a moment she had always imagined being part of. The house felt larger that night, but emptier too. The chair stood untouched, and her silence deepened, pressing against the walls until the whole room seemed to echo with absence. She turned away at last, but the weight of that empty chair followed her, heavier than the text that had started it all. The closet at the end of the hallway held more than coats and boxes. It held the small bundles she had prepared weeks ago, hidden behind stacks of folded blankets, as though secrecy could protect it. When she opened the door that night, the faint scent of cedar drifted out, mixed with dust that clung to the corners. She reached past an old winter coat and touched the paper edges of the package. It wasn't wrapped in store-bought gloss or glittering bows. She had chosen soft paper, a pale cream that reminded her of sunlight through curtains. Around it, she had tied a ribbon blue with faint white stitching, looped carefully, so the knot sat perfectly flat. It had taken her 3 tries to get it right. She had wanted it to look effortless, though she had labored over every detail. Lifting it out, she carried it to the bed and set it down gently, as though it were fragile. The weight was light in her hands, but the meaning was heavy. She sat on the edge of the mattress and let her fingers brush over the folds of paper, tracing the careful creases she had pressed weeks before. Inside was the gift she had chosen, with more thought than anything she had given in years. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't flashy, but it was hers, stitched together in quiet hours, crafted not just with fabric, but with memory. Each thread carried moments her daughter didn't know about. Long nights when she had sat awake, waiting for a car to return home. Mornings when she had folded laundry that smelled faintly of teenage perfume. Afternoons when silence filled the house after slammed doors, All of it lived in the small object, wrapped so carefully in paper. She had imagined the moment her daughter would open it. She had pictured her face softening, a smile breaking through whatever distance had grown between them. She had imagined laughter in the room, relatives clapping their hands, voices saying, "Look at what she made. Look at how thoughtful it is." That dream had carried her through long days when loneliness pressed too close. But the message "stay away" had shattered that vision. Now holding the gift, she wasn't sure what to do. To bring it would be to defy her daughter's words. To keep it here felt like betrayal of her own heart. She wanted it to be seen, wanted the effort to matter. Yet the ribbon, the paper, the folded letter tucked carefully inside all of it, seemed condemned to remain unopened. She untied the ribbon slowly, the soft fabric slipping against her fingers. She folded it back, careful not to crease it, and peeled the paper away. The object inside lay bare, small, and unassuming. She lifted it, feeling its weight in her hands, letting the quiet of the room press closer. It wasn't about the item itself, it never had been. It was about what it meant, what it carried silently. The folded letter rested beneath it. She had written it in her neatest hand, the script slow and deliberate. The words were not polished. They were raw, uneven, at times trembling. She hadn't signed it. She had thought leaving it anonymous might soften its presence, might let the words speak without being anchored to the weight of her name. But as she unfolded it now and read it again, she knew her daughter would recognize the writing instantly. Some things couldn't be disguised. She folded the paper again, slid it back beneath the gift, and wrapped everything carefully once more. She tied the ribbon until the knot sat flat again, perfect, deliberate. Her hands lingered on it as though holding it might hold her daughter, too. Then she placed it back in the closet, behind the boxes and coats, hidden again. It sat there like a secret, waiting for a moment that might never come. She closed the door gently, the click of the latch echoing louder than it should. In the silence that followed, she realized the gift was more than a package. It was her presence, reduced to paper and ribbon, waiting in the dark. And like the empty chair, it carried a truth she could not speak aloud. She wanted to be there, but she had already been told she could not. The house phone rang that night, breaking the silence. With its shrill insistence, she let it ring once, twice, 3 times before lifting it to her ear. Her sister's voice came through, clipped and low, as though secrecy could soften the sharpness of her words. "Did you get the message?" she asked, not bothering with greetings. She didn't answer right away. She simply let the silence stretch, the hum of the line carrying her restraint. Finally, she murmured, "I did." Her sister sighed, a weary exhale that spoke more than words. "Maybe it's for the best." She stressed. "Hormonal. You know how it is." There was no malice in her tone, but there was no comfort either. It was the voice of someone trying to explain away pain they didn't feel themselves. Later, another call came, this time from her cousin, voice tight with sympathy. "I don't know why she'd do that," the cousin whispered. "It's her first baby. You should be there. Everyone knows you should." Her words stumbled against the edges of judgment. But if she said not to come, the sentence trailed into silence, heavy with implication. She set the phone down after each call, her hand trembling slightly as she replaced it on the receiver. The conversations blurred together, some urging her to fight, to show up anyway, to claim her place. Others insisting she keep her distance, that a daughter's word carried final authority. Each voice tugged her in opposite directions, leaving her stranded in the middle, caught in a storm of opinion she never asked for. Even the quiet exchanges carried weight. An aunt sent a text, "It's her day, don't ruin it." Another relative countered with a message minutes later, "She'd regret it if you're not there. Don't let her push you out." She sat at the kitchen table with the phone beside her, scrolling through each message, reading them until the words blurred into one another. None of them touched the real wound. None of them captured what it felt like to be told she was unwanted by the very person she had once cradled, once fed, once soothed through sleepless nights. The voices of family echoed louder in her head as the night stretched on. She remembered holiday dinners when laughter spilled easily, when her daughter had sat beside her and whispered jokes too small for anyone else to hear. She remembered arguments tooth slammed doors. The cutting words but always there had been reconciliation, however fragile. Now the reconciliation seemed farther away than ever. She rose from the table and moved through the house, her footsteps soft on the worn wooden floor. Every room carried its own echo. In the living room, she could almost hear her daughter's teenage music vibrating the walls. In the hallway, she remembered late-night phone calls whispered under blankets. Even the bathroom mirror reflected years of her daughter's hurried mornings. Steam clinging to the glass as she rushed out to meet the day. All of it felt close, yet impossibly far. The voices of family only sharpened the contrast. Their opinions, reminding her of the divide. They didn't see the empty chair. They didn't know about the gift hidden in the closet. They spoke as though this were a simple matter of choice, of obedience. But for her, it was a matter of existence. Whether she was still part of her daughter's life, or whether she had been erased. She returned to the kitchen and sat again at the table, her eyes fixed on the phone. It glowed faintly. Another message. Arriving, she didn't open it. She didn't need to. She already knew what it would say. Some urging, some warning, some attempt to steer her, when the truth was she had no map left to follow. She pressed her hand flat against the table, grounding herself in its solid weight. The echoes of family swirled around her, loud but hollow. They didn't know what it felt like to read those words. They didn't know how silence had become her only answer. She turned the phone face down, its glow hidden. For the first time in hours, the house grew quiet again. But even in silence, the family's voices lingered, whispering from the corners, echoing through the walls. And she knew they would follow her until the day arrived, the day she had been told not to attend. The mailbox at the end of the driveway had always been a small ritual. Each afternoon she walked the short path to it, gravel crunching beneath her shoes, and opened the squeaking metal door with a faint hope of surprise. Most days it was nothing more than bills, catalogs, or envelopes stamped with logos she didn't recognize. Still, the act carried expectation, the possibility that something awaited her, a letter, a card, a sign she had not been forgotten. In the weeks leading up to the shower, she had checked it more carefully than usual. She had noticed the pastel envelopes on her neighbor's table one afternoon while returning a borrowed casserole dish. She had overheard relatives mention theirs in hushed tones during quick phone calls. The invitations had gone out. Everyone seemed to have one, except her. That knowledge sank slowly, like a stone into deep water. At first, she told herself it must have been delayed, misdelivered, lost in the shuffle of the postal system. She told herself to wait one more day, then another. But each time she opened the metal door, only ordinary papers lay inside, waiting, with the cold indifference of obligation. No pastel envelope, no sign of belonging. One evening, scrolling through her phone, she saw what she had been denied. A picture posted by her niece. A stack of invitations spread neatly across a coffee table. Each envelope decorated with swirls of handwriting and sealed with gold stickers. The caption read, "Can't wait to celebrate our little want-to-be." Dozens of comments followed, each confirming attendance, each string of hearts and exclamation points, a reminder of her absence. Her thumb hovered above the screen, tracing the shapes of the letters in the photograph. She enlarged the image, searching for her own name among the pile. She knew it wouldn't be there, but still she looked, the edges blurred as her eyes watered, though she blinked the tears back quickly. She wouldn't cry over an envelope, she told herself, but deep inside, she knew it wasn't the envelope she mourned. It was the place it represented, the circle she had once belonged to, the gathering she had been written out of before it even began. She placed the phone face down on the table and leaned back in her chair. The silence of the room pressed harder than usual, its edges sharpened by the sound of laughter echoing faintly from the photo in her mind. She could picture the moment. They would open the invitations, her daughter's handwriting carefully chosen, her relatives smiling as they tore through the seals. She had wanted to be part of that moment too, to hold an envelope with her name written in familiar ink, to feel the weight of welcome. Instead, she held nothing. The days passed, and with them, the certainty settled. She would not receive an invitation. The message had already told her to stay away, but the absence of the envelope felt colder, more deliberate. It was not just words on a screen. It was the quiet erasure of her name from a list. It was the physical proof that her presence had been denied before she even had a chance to ask. She stood one afternoon in front of the open closet, the wrapped gift still tucked safely behind the blankets. She lifted it briefly, held it against her chest, then set it back down. She thought of the other gifts that would arrive, boxes wrapped in glittering paper, ribbons curling down the sides, names written proudly on each tag. Hers would not be among them, at least not in the way she had imagined. That night, she sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on. The mailbox stood in shadow at the end of the driveway, its door closed, silent. She realized she no longer felt the pull to check it. Whatever it might hold now would never be enough. She turned away, the reflection of her own face staring back at her in the glass. The invitation had never come. And in its absence, a truth settled heavy in her chest. She had not been forgotten by accident. She had been left out on purpose. The house was still when she woke before dawn, the kind of stillness that pressed on her ears and made each small sound seem louder than it should be. She moved through the rooms with careful steps, her slippers brushing the floor in soft whispers. She didn't turn on the lights right away. Instead, she let the pale glow of morning creep through the curtains, washing the furniture in muted gray dot. Her eyes kept drifting to the closet at the end of the hall. She hadn't planned to touch the gift again. Not after the message, not after the missing invitation. But that morning, something pulled her toward it. A quiet insistence that she could not ignore. The door creaked as she opened it. Her fingers reached past folded coats, brushed against the cardboard edge of an old box, and closed around the soft ridges of wrapped paper. She pulled the package out slowly, as though afraid even the gift might resist her touch. She carried it back to the kitchen table and set it down carefully, her hands lingering on the ribbon, as though it might steady her. The ribbon was still neat, still tied in the way she had labored over weeks before, but in the dim morning light, she saw imperfections she hadn't noticed before, the crease where it had been folded too tightly, the faint smudge on the paper from when she had adjusted it with tired hands. She smoothed them out with her palm, though the flaws remained, small scars of her effort. She reached for a pen. A card lay on the table, blank, waiting. She had bought a small stack of them weeks ago, each with watercolor flowers printed on the front. She had written one already, the letter folded inside the gift, but this was different. This card was meant to carry only her name, the briefest sign of herself. She stared at the blank surface for a long time. To write her name felt like defiance. To leave it empty felt like surrender. Her hand trembled as she lowered the pen, the black ink pressing into the fibers of the card. She didn't write much, just her name, nothing more. It looked both too small and too heavy on the page. Folding the card, she slid it beneath the ribbon, tucking it carefully so it stayed in place. She adjusted it once, then again, until it looked deliberate. Her movements were precise, almost ritualistic, as though order might give her strength. She brewed coffee next, the scent filling the kitchen. She didn't drink it right away. Instead, she sat at the table with the mug in her hands, staring at the gift. The steam rose in slow curls, fading into the dim light above. The cup warmed her fingers, but her chest felt colder than ever. She imagined herself walking into the baby shower, placing the gift among the others. She imagined her daughter opening it, her hands pausing when she saw the familiar handwriting. She pictured the silence that would follow, the room shifting under the weight of recognition. These images filled her, not with comfort, but with something heavier, an ache she couldn't name, caught between hope and dread. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. She counted each second, each minute, as if the sound itself were preparing her for the day to come. She had no plan to defy her daughter's words, no certainty of what she would do, but the act of preparation had taken root. She couldn't untangle herself from it. By the time the sun rose higher, the gift was back in the closet. The ribbon lay flat, the card tucked neatly in place, the package waiting in its quiet corner. She closed the door softly, pressing her palm against the wood for a long moment before stepping away. The house returned to silence, but the silence had changed. It was no longer just emptiness. It was expectation, quiet and heavy. A waiting that belonged as much to the gift as to her. And though she did not say it aloud, she knew the truth. She had prepared, despite everything. The morning of the shower broke brighter than she expected. Sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor in wide stripes, sharp enough to highlight the dust she had missed on the baseboards. She stood there for a long moment, her hands braced on the counter, watching the light creep further into the room, as if it were marking the day itself. The silence of the house was deeper than usual. No phone rang, no voices carried across the hall. Even the refrigerator hummed lower, as though the house itself knew to keep still. She moved through the room slowly, almost cautiously, as if each step might trigger something fragile. In the closet, the gift waited. She had placed it carefully the night before, the ribbon smoothed flat, the small card tucked securely under the fold. She didn't take it out this time. She only opened the door a crack, enough to see the soft cream paper glowing faintly in the dim space. She closed it again quickly, as though afraid looking too long might undo her resolve. The clock in the hallway ticked louder than it should have. Each passing minute carried her closer to the hour when family and friends would gather elsewhere, when laughter would spill through a rented hall or someone's living room, when her daughter would stand at the center of it all, Smiling, she pictured the balloons pink, white, maybe gold, the tables lined with food, the voices overlapping in cheerful conversation. She pictured her daughter opening envelopes, holding gifts high so everyone could admire them. She would not be there. She filled her kettle and set it on the stove. The whistle came slowly, its rising pitch filling the quiet house until it felt unbearable. She poured the hot water over a tea bag, the steam clouding her glasses, the smell sharp and earthy. She carried the mug to the kitchen table and sat in the chair nearest the window. The seat across from her daughter's old place remained empty. She tried not to imagine what it would feel like to walk into that shower, despite the message. She tried not to picture her daughter's face hardening, the room turning quiet, whispers buzzing at the edges. Yet the thought intruded anyway, uninvited, vivid. It made her chest tighten. Instead, she forced her mind toward smaller things. She washed a few dishes, even ones already clean. She folded a blanket on the couch, smoothing its corners again and again, until there was no fold left to improve. She dusted the shelves, her hand moving mechanically, her eyes not really seeing. Every action was a substitute for presence, a way to fill the space where she should have been. By mid-morning, the house smelled faintly of lemon polish and soap. She sat again at the kitchen table, her hands folded around the cooling mug of tea. Outside, cars passed occasionally, their tires hissing against the pavement. She wondered if one of them carried her relatives, dressed neatly, laughing together, on their way to celebrate her daughter. Her phone lay on the table, dark. She hadn't expected a message, but she still looked at it every few minutes. Nothing came. No photos, no words, no last-minute change of heart. The silence from her daughter was complete. The clock struck 11. She imagined guests beginning to arrive, coats lifted from shoulders, gifts stacked on tables, greetings exchanged in warm voices. She imagined her daughter standing by the door, smiling as each person entered. The image stung, but she let it linger. She wanted, at least, to picture her daughter happy. She stayed at the table until the light shifted across the floor, the afternoon sun softer, the house warmer. The day carried on outside her walls, but inside, time stretched thin. She was both present and absent, both here and erased. And though no one would see it, she marked the day in silence, just as surely as they marked it with celebration. The sounds reached her only through imagination, yet they filled the house as vividly as if the celebration were taking place in the next room. She pictured the hum of conversation first, voices rising and falling in uneven waves, punctuated by bursts of laughter, chairs scraping against polished floors, paper plates bending under the weight of food carefully arranged on platters, someone tapping a glass with a spoon to quiet the room, to call attention to her daughter. She wasn't there to hear any of it, but the echoes lived inside her mind, steady and relentless. On the couch, she sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the muted television. The news anchor's lips moved. The captions scrolled across the bottom, but none of it registered. Her attention was elsewhere across town, in a space she had been told not to enter. Her daughter, who would be surrounded by people. She would laugh, perhaps glow with the strange radiance that expectant mothers often carried. Guests would compliment her, tell her how beautiful she looked, how the baby would be blessed to have her as a mother. Those words, once, would have filled her with pride. Now they felt like stones placed gently but firmly on her chest. The gift still waited in the closet, untouched. She could picture it as clearly as if it sat in front of her now, its cream paper and blue ribbon still neat, the small card tucked under the fold. It should have been on a table among the others, carried forward into her daughter's hands, opened with care, appreciated with surprise. Instead, it remained hidden in the dark. A secret celebration no one else would ever know. She rose from the couch and moved to the kitchen. Her steps slow, her slippers soft against the floor. She filled a glass of water, drank it in careful sips, and set it down on the counter. The clock on the wall read just past 2. The shower would be in full motion now, gifts being opened one by one. The room erupting with cheers as small clothes and tiny blankets were lifted high for all to see. Her relatives would be there, her sister, her cousins, her nieces. Their voices would mingle in warm affection, their smiles wide, their phones lifted to capture every moment. Someone would post pictures before the day ended. She knew this. She both dreaded and expected it. By evening, her phone would light up with images she had not asked for, glimpses into a gathering that had moved forward without her. She leaned against the counter, her hand pressing against the cool surface to steady herself. For a moment, she imagined herself there not in reality, but in memory. She saw herself standing in the back of the room, clapping politely, her eyes fixed on her daughter. She saw the moment her daughter's gaze might have lifted, might have softened, might have recognized her presence with something close to forgiveness. But the vision dissolved quickly, replaced by the truth. Her daughter had not wanted her there. The refrigerator hummed, a low vibration that filled the silence. She closed her eyes and listened, pretending it was the murmur of voices, the sound of belonging. When she opened them again, the kitchen was as it had been, quiet, steady, indifferent. She returned to the living room, sat again on the couch, and folded her hands once more. The sunlight shifted slowly across the carpet, marking the hours. She let the day pass over her, not resisting it, not trying to fill it with distractions. It was the day of the baby shower, and her absence was part of it, as real as the presence of balloons and cake. The gathering was happening without her, and she carried that truth in silence, as heavy as if she had been seated at the table herself. It began with the faint buzz of her phone against the wooden table. A single vibration first, then another, then a string of them, until the sound felt louder than the clock on the wall. She didn't reach for it right away. She sat in her chair, staring at the black screen from across the room, as though distance might hold the tide back a little longer. When she finally picked it up, the first image filled the screen before she even touched it. Her niece had posted to the family group thread a photograph of her daughter, standing at the center of the room, framed by balloons in pale pink and white. A banner stretched across the wall behind her, welcome, little one letters cut from shiny gold foil. Her daughter's hands rested on her stomach, her smile wide, her eyes bright in the way that only joy could make them. The next image came seconds later. Her daughter sat in a circle of folding chairs, tearing at pastel wrapping paper while relatives leaned forward in anticipation. The package opened to reveal a blanket embroidered with the baby's name, and the room seemed to glow in the still frame of the photo. Every face reflected celebration. Every face but hers. More pictures followed. Tables covered in cupcakes, cookies iced in tiny bottles and rattles, glasses raised in toast. Friends leaned close, arms wrapped around one another, cheeks pressed together in smiling poses. Her phone screen glowed with image after image, each one a reminder of the chair she had not been allowed to sit in, the conversations she had not been part of, the laughter she had not shared. She scrolled slowly, not because she wanted to, but because she couldn't stop herself. Each photo cut deeper than the one before. Her daughter opening boxes of clothes too small for any child to wear longer than a season. The cake, frosted in white with pink lettering that spelled the baby's name once more. Guests gathered around her daughter, the centerpiece of a celebration that seemed to radiate warmth through the screen. She set the phone down, then picked it up again within seconds. Her thumb hovered over the images, enlarging some, looking for details. She spotted her sister in one, clapping her hands. She saw her cousin holding a tray of food, smiling as she offered it around. She recognized the living room the soft, green curtains she had once helped her daughter hang, the old wooden shelf she had dusted during visits years ago. All of it looked the same, yet none of it belonged to her anymore. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message separate from the photos a relative had written. "It's such a beautiful day. Wish you were here." The words twisted in her chest. Did they mean it? Or had they written it because politeness demanded some acknowledgement of her absence? She didn't respond. She COULDN single quotes T. Instead, she set the phone face down on the table. The images still glowed beneath the darkened screen, pressing against her, even in silence. She folded her hands tightly in her lap and tried to breathe evenly, tried to quiet the ache building inside. The house felt smaller, the walls closer. Her eyes shifted toward the hallway, toward the closet where the gift still waited. She imagined her daughter opening it there in the circle, unwrapping the careful folds of paper, holding the object up for the room to see. She imagined the silence that would have followed, the recognition. But the gift was not there. It was hidden still, in the dark, untouched. The photos would keep coming. She knew that. For the rest of the night, her phone would carry evidence of the celebration, a gallery of moments she had been erased from. And tomorrow, when the images slowed, their weight would remain. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes. The pictures had traveled across the distance, piercing the walls of her house. She had not gone to the baby shower, yet the baby shower had found its way to her, frame by frame, whether she wanted it or not. The call came late, long after the last of the photos had arrived. The house was quiet, dark, except for the lamp in the corner that threw soft yellow light. Across the table, she had tried to sleep but couldn't. The images of balloons and cake, of laughter frozen in pixels, still clung to her. When the phone rang, its shrill tones startled her. Cutting through the silence like glass-breaking dot, she hesitated before answering. For a moment, she let it ring, her thumb hovering over the screen. The caller ID showed her sister's name. She exhaled slowly and pressed the green circle. Her voice sounded thinner than she intended, drained of all the words she hadn't spoken all day. Her sister's voice came fast, almost breathless. It was beautiful. The shower, everything was perfect. You should have seen it. The decorations, the food, the gifts. Her words tumbled one over another, as if recounting them might bring the day alive again. She sat quietly. The receiver pressed against her ear, saying nothing. Her sister paused then, the rush slowing. I mean, it was missing something. Or someone. Her voice dipped, softer now, as though realizing too late what she was admitting. She closed her eyes, her hand tightening on the phone. The silence between them stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, she asked, was she happy? There was a pause, long enough that she thought the line might have dropped. Then her sister answered, yes. She was radiant, smiling all day. Everyone said how beautiful she looked. The words should have comforted her, but instead, they cut sharper. She wanted her daughter happy, of course, but the knowledge that her daughter's happiness existed without her, perhaps, because of her absence, settled like a stone in her chest. Her sister tried again. There were moments, though, when gifts were opened, or when people asked questions. I caught her looking around, like she was searching for someone. Like maybe she noticed you weren't there. Or maybe, she murmured, her voice steady but heavy, she was making sure I wasn't. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Her sister cleared her throat. I don't think that's true. She's just stubborn. You know how she is. She didn't reply. She stared at the table, at the faint scratches left by years of use, at the small cup ring from her forgotten tea earlier in the day. She felt as though she were staring at proof marks left behind by things that once mattered, now ignored. Her sister's voice lowered. You should call her. Maybe tonight. Maybe tomorrow. Don't let this sit too long. She shook her head, though the gesture went unseen. She told me to stay away, she whispered, and I did. That was my answer. I won't chase her with another. Her sister sighed, the sound frayed at the edges. Sometimes rules need breaking. Even hers. The line went quiet again, both of them breathing into the silence, neither willing to hang up. Finally, her sister said, I'll let you rest. It was a long day for everyone. She nodded, though she knew her sister couldn't see it. Good night, she said softly, and ended the call before more words could come. The phone rested on the table again, face down. The room returned to stillness. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the darkened ceiling. The conversation replaying in her mind. Her sister had spoken with warmth, with sympathy, but it had not eased the weight. If anything, it had sharpened it. The shower had happened, the laughter had filled the room, and her daughter had smiled. She had been absent, as requested. And now the silence that followed carried more than loneliness. It carried finality. The closet door had always closed without effort, but that night it felt heavier when she pushed it open. The air inside was still, colder than the rest of the house, carrying the faint scent of cedar from a block she had tucked there years ago. Against the dark, folded coats and stacked boxes, the gift stood out like a secret waiting to be found. Its paper gleamed faintly, untouched. The ribbon still neat from the careful hands that had tied it. She knelt before it, resting her palms on the carpet, her knees creaking from the weight of the day. For a long moment, she didn't reach for it, she only stared, as though the package might change if she looked at it long enough. She thought of the party, of the pile of brightly wrapped boxes stacked high on a table her daughter had decorated. Somewhere in that pile, she believed, this gift should have been. Finally, she picked it up. The paper crackled softly under her touch, the ribbon slipping slightly against the edge. She carried it to the kitchen table and set it down carefully, almost reverently, as though it were fragile. Sitting there, it looked smaller than she remembered. The corners weren't as sharp, the folds not as precise. In her absence, it had aged, waiting with her. She brushed a hand across the surface, tracing the faint smudge she had noticed days earlier. Her thumb pressed against the ribbon, lifting it gently, but she didn't untie it. To open it felt like surrender, a final acceptance that it would never leave this house. But to leave it wrapped was to carry its weight longer, a reminder of what it was meant to be. Her eyes drifted to the small card tucked beneath the fold. She slid it out, unfolded it slowly. Just her name, written in neat black ink, stared back at her. A name she had thought would rest on her daughter's lap. A name her daughter would see among the swirl of tissue paper and ribbons. But her daughter had never seen it, and perhaps never would. She pressed the card flat against the table, smoothing it with her palm. For a moment, she imagined writing more. A sentence, a wish, an explanation. But the pen lay untouched, and the blank space stayed empty. Words, she felt, had lost their place. The clock ticked steadily above her head. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the gift as if it might breathe. Her thoughts wandered back through the years, birthdays, holidays, moments when giving had been simple. She had wrapped dolls, clothes, books. Her daughter's hands had torn through paper with excitement, her laughter filling the room. The memory ached now. The contrast too sharp. This gift was different. It was a bridge that had never been crossed. She stood and carried it to the living room, setting it on the coffee table in front of her. She lowered herself onto the couch and sat there, watching it as though it might move. Outside, the night deepened, the street quiet, the windows reflecting her own still face. The gift sat between her and the silence, heavy with meaning it had never been allowed to fulfill. She wondered briefly if she might deliver it anyway, leave it on the porch, ring the bell, and walk away before anyone could open the door. The thought gave her a momentary flicker of resolve, but it faded quickly. Her daughter's words "stay away" echoed louder than the imagined footsteps. To leave it at the door felt less like a gesture of love and more like defiance. She reached forward, resting her hand on the box one last time. The paper was smooth under her palm, but she felt its weight far beyond what cardboard and ribbon could hold. When she returned it to the closet, the door closed softly behind her. The gift remained inside, sealed in silence, waiting, and so did she. Thought the house seemed to stretch wider after dark, its rooms filling not with sound, but with a kind of silence that pressed against her ears. She turned off the lamp in the living room, leaving only the faint glow of the clock on the wall and the sliver of moonlight slipping through the curtains. Still, she couldn't bring herself to climb the stairs to bed. Instead, she stayed on the couch, her body curled against the armrest, as though sleep might come if she waited long enough. It didn't. The gift in the closet tugged at her mind, though she had closed the door carefully, sealing it away, as if that might lessen its pull. She could almost hear it in the stillness, the faint rustle of ribbon, the paper shifting, the unspoken message trapped inside. Her eyes burned from staring too long at nothing, but each time she closed them, she saw the same images: her daughter, surrounded by balloons, her smile wide, the circle of faces lit with joy, all of it without her. She stood once, restless, and walked the length of the hallway. Her slippers whispered against the floor. She paused at the closet door, but didn't touch the handle. Instead, she pressed her palm flat against the wood, feeling its coolness seep into her skin. Then she turned away, back to the living room. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen, then clicked off, plunging the house into a deeper kind of quiet. She sat back on the couch and folded a blanket over her lap, her fingers gripping the edges tightly. The television remote lay nearby, but she didn't reach for it. The thought of voices, even scripted ones, felt like intrusion. Hours passed. In fragments, the clock ticked steadily, each second a small reminder of how long the night could stretch. At midnight, she thought of calling her sister, of asking how her daughter had looked when the last guests left. But she didn't. At 1, she considered writing a message, just a line. Something like "I hope it went well," but her phone remained untouched on the table. At 2, she sat in silence so thick that the sound of her own breath startled her. She thought back to nights when her daughter had been small, when the silence had been broken by the cries of a newborn, by the shuffle of feet across the floorboards, by the soft lullabies sung in the dark. She remembered the weight of her daughter's small body in her arms, the way she had rocked her until sleep returned. Those memories felt both close and impossibly far, like light from a star that had burned out long ago but still reached her eyes. By 3, she gave up on sleep altogether. She stood again, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders, and walked to the kitchen. She filled a glass with water, the tap's trickle sounding too loud in the empty space. She drank slowly, then set the glass down and gripped the counter's edge. Her reflection in the window above the sink stared back at her, ghost-like in the dim light. She barely recognized the lines etched into her face, the heaviness in her eyes. She whispered once, softly, into the stillness, "Why?" It was the only word she could manage, and it carried no answer back to her. The night dragged on, its hours indistinguishable, each one stitched with the same ache. She returned to the couch, pulled the blanket tighter, and sat as the clock marched forward. She thought of her daughter asleep now, perhaps exhausted from the celebration, perhaps dreaming of the baby soon to arrive. She wondered if her daughter thought of her at all. The sky outside lightened slowly, the edges of dawn creeping in. Another day would begin soon, carrying its weight, its silence. The long night had ended, but the heaviness it left behind remained, and she knew it would not lift easily. The morning after the shower stretched longer than most. She had barely slept, drifting in and out of shallow rest on the couch. The light of day crept slowly through the curtains, pulling her from half-dreams of voices, laughter, and unopened gifts. Her body ached, not only from the hours spent curled on hard cushions, but from the weight of carrying silence too long. By mid-morning, she forced herself to rise. The house looked unchanged, yet it felt different, heavier, as though the night had left a residue clinging to every surface. She made coffee, though she barely tasted it. She folded the blanket on the couch, smoothing it flat with hands that trembled. Her eyes drifted again and again to the closet door. The gift waited still. She dressed slowly, choosing clothes without much thought. A plain sweater, worn jeans, shoes that had seen too many years. As she tied her laces, her mind moved not to where she was, but to where she might go. She had not been invited yesterday. She had been told to stay away. Yet the thought of remaining in the house another day, surrounded by echoes of absence, felt unbearable. The decision came quietly, not as defiance, but as need. She would visit, not the shower, too late for that, but her daughter's house. When the celebration had ended, when the noise had stilled, when only the remnants remained. Perhaps she would not go inside. Perhaps she would only stand outside, just long enough to see with her own eyes that the day had passed and life continued. She tucked the gift under her arm. Its weight felt sharper now, its edges pressing against her side, as though reminding her of the choice. She whispered once into the empty hallway, as though rehearsing, just to drop it off, just to leave it at the door. The words carried no promise of acceptance, only the fragile reassurance of action. The drive across town was quiet. The streets were half empty, the world going about its business without noticing her. She passed shops she had visited years ago with her daughter, stores that sold baby clothes, school supplies, birthday cakes. Each one stirred small memories, each one stung. When she turned onto her daughter's street, her chest tightened. Cars still lined the curb, remnants of yesterday's gathering. A few neighbors lingered outside, talking casually, carrying leftover decorations from one house to another. She slowed her steps as she approached, clutching the gift tighter. Her daughter's house looked bright, almost festive still. Streamers hung loose along the porch railing. A balloon, half deflated, bobbed gently in the breeze. Tethered to a chair, through the window, she saw the faint movement of figures inside shadows carrying plates, voices too soft to make out. She stopped at the edge of the walkway. Her breath caught. To step closer felt dangerous, as though one more stride might betray the message she had obeyed the day before. She stood there, half hidden by the tree at the curb, the gift heavy against her arm. A sound reached her, then the faint cry of a baby. Not her grandchild, not yet, but a guest's infant. The sound carried easily in the still air, piercing her chest with longing. She swallowed hard, the urge to step forward almost overwhelming. The front door opened suddenly. Her sister emerged, carrying a bag of discarded wrapping paper. She froze when her eyes landed on her, standing by the curb with the gift pressed to her chest. For a long moment, neither moved. Then her sister gave a small nod, her expression unreadable, and carried the bag to the bin. She lowered her gaze, shame heating her skin. She turned then, slowly, walking back to her car. The gift remained clutched tightly in her arms. She had thought she might leave it there, but she couldn't. Not yet. She drove home in silence. The closet door opened once more. The gift returned to its waiting place. The visit had happened, but it had changed nothing. The days after the visit carried a heaviness that did not lift. Each morning she rose at the same hour, made the same cup of coffee, moved through the same rooms. Yet the silence seemed sharper now, as if the walls themselves had learned her absence from her daughter's life, and pressed harder against her. The house did not echo with laughter. It did not smell of frosting or balloons. It only held her, and the steady reminder that she had stood at the edge of the celebration, and turned back. Her daughter did not call. No message arrived, not even a polite thank you for respecting her request to stay away. The phone that had once lit up with daily check-ins, casual notes, and questions about recipes, now sat flat and dark on the table. Sometimes she checked, to be certain it worked, sending herself small reminders, alarms, or notes. The device buzzed obediently each time, proving it wasn't broken. It was the connection that had fractured. She tried to busy herself with tasks, laundry folded with precision, the kitchen scrubbed until its surfaces gleamed, the garden trimmed, though winter pressed its weight on the soil. None of it filled the gap. She found herself standing at windows too often, staring at the empty street, waiting for something that would not come. The gift in the closet seemed heavier each day. She opened the door once, stared at it, then closed it again, quickly, as though afraid of what it revealed. To leave it there felt like defeat, yet to deliver it felt like trespass. It sat as proof of her uncertainty, sealed in ribbon and silence. Relatives called from time to time, their voices careful, too measured. They spoke of ordinary things, the weather, groceries, the inconvenience of traffic, but under every sentence lingered the unspoken. No one mentioned the shower directly. No one asked why she had not come. They knew, or they chose not to ask. Either way, their silence added to her own. She thought back often to her daughter's childhood, replaying the moments when distance had first begun to grow between them. Small arguments that seemed insignificant then, curfews, homework, friendships, questioned. Each disagreement had left a tiny crack. She had always believed they could be mended, that time would smooth them over. Yet now, with a text message still etched into her mind, "Stay away from my baby shower," she realized the cracks had widened into something more permanent. At night, she lay awake, the quiet pressing against her ears, until she thought she could hear her own pulse. She imagined her daughter lying in another bed across the city, perhaps resting a hand on her stomach, perhaps dreaming of the baby soon to arrive. She wondered if her daughter thought of her at all. If she did, what shape did those thoughts take? Resentment, relief, or something softer, hidden beneath anger, too faint to admit? Days passed without contact. Each one left her weaker in hope, stronger in resignation. The distance had grown into something tangible, a wall she could feel even from miles away. And though she still carried love, still carried longing, she began to understand that love alone could not close the gap. The house remained steady, unchanged, as though mocking her. The clock ticked the same. The walls held the same. But her place in her daughter's life, once steady, once unquestioned, was no longer certain. And so the distance grew, invisible yet undeniable, stretching wider with each passing day. The knock came on a Tuesday afternoon, sharp against the front door, echoing through the narrow hallway like something out of place. She was in the kitchen, rinsing a cup in the sink, her sleeves rolled up past her elbows. The sound startled her, made her pause mid-motion. Visitors were rare, almost unheard of. The street was quiet, neighbors polite but distant. She stood still, waiting for the sound to repeat. It did. 3 firm raps, each spaced evenly, as though the one on the other side carried patience, but not uncertainty. She dried her hands slowly on a dish towel, her heart thudding harder than it should. When she opened the door, she braced herself for a neighbor. Perhaps someone selling services, perhaps the mailman with a package. Instead, she found her sister, standing there, her coat buttoned tight against the wind, her expression caught somewhere between determination and unease. In her hands, she carried a paper bag, folded neatly at the top. "I was in the area," her sister said quickly, as though rehearsed. "Thought I'd stop by." She stepped aside without a word, letting her in. The house felt different, with another presence inside, the silence disrupted by the sound of shoes on the mat, of a coat being draped across a chair. Her sister placed the bag on the counter. The faint scent of baked bread rose from it. They sat at the table, the bag between them. For a while, neither spoke. Her sister busied herself with unwrapping the bread, slicing it with a knife she fetched from the drawer, setting the pieces on a plate. The normalcy of it felt strange, like pretending the air wasn't charged with something heavier. Finally, her sister said softly, "She asked about you." Her breath caught. She lifted her eyes slowly. "When?" "After the shower." "Not right away, later, when most people had gone." She was tired, sitting on the couch, and she asked if you had called. I told her no. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles pawing. The words carried both hope and ache. Her daughter had asked but had not reached out. The distance was still hers to hold. Her sister continued, choosing each word carefully. "She's proud, you know that. Stubborn, like her father, but she's not without thought. I could see it in her face. She missed you, even if she couldn't say it." The silence stretched. She reached for the bread, though she had no appetite, breaking a piece off only to crumble it in her fingers. She told me to stay away, she whispered. And I did. What else can I do? Sometimes, her sister said, her voice firmer now. Doing what someone asks isn't the same as doing what they need. She needed space that day. But she still needs her mother. Especially now. Her throat tightened, her eyes burning with the weight of it. And what if I go, and she pushes me farther away? Then, at least you'll know you tried. The clock ticked above them, steady, unbothered. The bread lay untouched between them, its warmth fading into the cool air. Sister reached across the table, placing her hand lightly over hers. Don't let silence decide everything for you. She nodded faintly, though she could not speak. The knock had come unexpectedly, breaking the rhythm of her days. But it had left behind something she had not felt in weeks, a fragile stirring, a thread of possibility. When her sister left, the house fell quiet again. Yet the silence felt different now. Not final, not absolute. It carried the echo of her sister's words, and the faintest suggestion that the distance, though wide, might not be unbridgeable. And for the first time in many days, she let herself wonder what would happen if she knocked on her daughter's door. The decision came quietly, not in a rush of certainty, but in the slow rhythm of days that had grown too heavy to bear. She woke earlier than usual, the sky outside still painted with the soft gray of dawn. For a long moment she sat on the edge of her bed, her hands folded in her lap, her chest tight with the thought of what lay ahead. The silence of the house pressed around her, as though it too waited for her choice. She rose, dressed in plain clothes, nothing that suggested occasion. A cardigan pulled over a simple blouse, dark slacks, shoes worn but polished. She moved through the house with careful steps, pausing only once at the closet door. Her hand lingered on the knob. Inside, the gift remained, untouched, ribbons still neat. She opened the door, pulled it from its resting place, and held it against her chest. The weight was no lighter than before, but this time she did not return it. The car sat cold in the driveway, its windows beaded with dew. She brushed them clear with the edge of her sleeve before climbing inside. The engine turned over with a low hum, filling the silence with something steady. She sat for a moment, her fingers tight on the steering wheel, staring at the empty street ahead. The drive began slow. Houses slipped past her window, their porches still quiet, curtains drawn against the early light. She knew these streets well. She had once taken with her daughter in the back seat, her small voice asking questions about everything they passed. Now the car held only her, the gift resting on the passenger seat, its paper catching the light of the rising sun. Traffic was thin, the roads stretched long and clear. She barely noticed the landmarks as they passed shops with their signs still dark, schools waiting for children, bus stops standing empty. The hum of the tires against asphalt filled the silence, steady and relentless. Her thoughts drifted in fragments, never settling. Memories of her daughter's laughter, the sharp echo of the text she had received, the uncertain hope her sister's words had left behind. Halfway there, she pulled to the side of the road and stopped. The car idled quietly, its vibration buzzing beneath her feet. She sat with her hands still on the wheel, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Her breath came shallow, her chest tight. She whispered to herself, though the words barely rose above the sound of the engine. What if she doesn't open the door? The question hung in the air, unanswered. She looked at the gift on the seat beside her, its ribbon bright against the dull interior. She reached out, ran her hand across it once, then let it go. When she pulled back onto the road, her grip was firmer. The houses grew familiar as she neared her daughter's neighborhood. Decorations still clung to the porches, remnants of the shower. A stray balloon, half deflated, bobbed against a mailbox. She slowed as she turned onto her daughter's street, her stomach twisting. The house stood at the end, quiet now. The celebration, long since over. The porch was bare, except for a chair and a small welcome mat. She parked at the curb, her hands frozen on the wheel. The silence inside the car grew heavy, wrapping around her tighter than any blanket. Minutes passed before she finally reached for the gift. She held it close, steadying herself with its weight. Her heart pounded so loud it drowned the ticking of the dashboard clock. She opened the door, stepped out, her shoes crunching softly against the gravel. The street was empty, no one to watch, no one to judge. Yet each step toward the house felt like walking into an unseen crowd. She stopped at the foot of the porch steps, clutching the gift so tightly the paper bent beneath her fingers. The silence followed her still, unbroken, as though waiting to see whether she would climb those steps or turn back once more. The steps rose before her, like something far steeper than wood and nails. She stood at the bottom, frozen, The gift clutched to her chest, as if it were the only anchor keeping her from turning back. The house was still, its windows reflecting the pale morning light. A curtain stirred faintly in the living room, but it could have been the draft. It could have been nothing. She told herself no one was watching, though her heart thudded with the certainty that eyes were somewhere on her. She placed one foot on the first step. The wood creaked faintly beneath her shoe, the sound louder than it should have been in the quiet street. Her breath caught, her chest tightening, but she climbed. Another. The air seemed different here, closer, as if she had stepped into the gravity of something she had long avoided. At the top of the steps, she paused. The door loomed in front of her, its blue paint slightly weathered, the welcome mat neatly aligned. Beneath, she shifted the gift in her arms, its corners digging into her skin through the cardigan. Her hand hovered near the doorbell, trembling faintly. Knocking would be easy, she told herself. A simple rap of knuckles against wood, a press of a button. Yet it felt like more than that. It felt like surrendering her silence, like risking whatever sharp words might follow. Her daughter had told her once already. Stay away. Would the door open only to repeat that command? Harsher this time, cutting deeper. She closed her eyes briefly, listening to the faint sounds that leaked through the wall's distant movement. Perhaps a drawer opening, perhaps footsteps overhead. The life inside continued, whether she stood here or not. That was the ache of it. She had become the outsider to her own daughter's story. Asterisk, her hand lowered, brushing against the mat. She thought of leaving the gift there, setting it gently on the ground and walking back to her car. It would be easier that way. No confrontation, no words exchanged. Only the silent hope that one day her daughter might unwrap it and think of her differently. Yet, as she bent slightly, the ribbon sliding in her grasp, something inside her resisted. To leave it without being seen felt like hiding. And she had hidden long enough. She straightened again. Her fingers touched the cool brass of the doorbell. She pressed, and the chime rang faintly inside, muffled by the walls. Her breath caught in her throat, her body tense as she waited. Seconds stretched like minutes. The sound of footsteps grew clearer now, moving toward the door. She adjusted the gift in her arms, her palms damp against the paper. The door handle turned. For a moment, she wanted to run, to retreat down the steps, to slip into her car before the door opened fully. But her legs remained rooted, her chest rising and falling in sharp, shallow breaths. The door opened slowly, revealing her daughter. She stood there, her hair pulled back, her face tired but alert. Her eyes flicked immediately to the gift, then back to her mother's face. Silence filled the space between them, heavier than the door itself. Neither spoke. The house seemed to hold its breath. She opened her mouth once, then closed it again. Words had carried them to this distance. Words had built the wall. What could they do now but wound further? Her daughter's hand rested on the edge of the door, her knuckles pale. The gift pressed against her mother's chest, its ribbon trembling faintly with each uneven breath. And in that pause on the doorstep, with silence between them, both knew the choice was no longer about gifts or showers. It was about whether either of them could step through the door at all. For a moment, neither of them moved. The open door was not an invitation, not yet. It was a pause, a space where both women stood, divided, one on the porch, one just inside. The air between them dense with history. The morning light slipped past them, casting the threshold in a pale glow. She shifted the gift in her arms, her fingers pressing against the ribbon until it dented. Her daughter's eyes flicked to it once more, then back to her face, the look unreadable. There had been times when she could read every expression her daughter wore, when a furrowed brow meant frustration with homework, when a quiet pout meant sleepiness, when a sudden grin meant joy that couldn't be contained. But now, the woman standing before her seemed a stranger. Her lips parted, searching for words, but none came. To say "I'm sorry" felt insufficient, and to say "I missed you" felt like trespass. She waited instead, her silence steady, though inside her chest every breath carried the weight of a plea. Daughter's voice, when it came, was quiet. "Why are you here?" The words cut sharper than any shout could have. She swallowed, her throat dry. To bring this, she lifted the gift slightly, as though its presence explained everything. Her daughter's gaze lingered on it, her jaw tightening. "I told you not to come. I know." Her own voice was low, almost a whisper. I needed to." The silence stretched again, broken only by the faint sound of a clock ticking somewhere inside the house. The world beyond the porch seemed distant. No cars, no footsteps, no interruptions. Just the two of them, the gift, and the space that had widened between them. Her daughter's hand tightened on the door, her knuckles whitening. For a moment, it seemed she might close it. The motion began, subtle, the hinge creaking slightly as the gap narrowed. But then it stopped, the door left ajar, her daughter frozen in indecision. "Mom," she said finally, her tone heavier now, "you don't get to just show up." She nodded, accepting the truth of it. "I know," she repeated softly. Her grip tightened on the gift, then loosened again, as though she wasn't sure whether to offer it forward or pull it back. "But I couldn't let it sit in the closet any longer." Her daughter's eyes softened for only a fraction of a second, then hardened again. She sighed, the sound weary, as though it carried months' of unspoken words. "You can leave." The words stung, but she nodded once more. Slowly, she bent down, placing the gift carefully on the mat between them. Her hands lingered on the paper for a second too long before she withdrew. The ribbon gleamed faintly in the morning light, bright against the worn fibers of the mat. She straightened, her eyes meeting her daughter's again. There was no anger in them now, but no warmth either. Only distance, stretched taut across the space between porch and living room. Her daughter hesitated, then shifted the door slightly wider, not enough to invite her in, but enough to acknowledge she still stood there. "You should go," she said quietly. Her chest tightened, but she nodded. She turned slowly, stepping back toward the stairs. The boards creaked beneath her shoes. At the bottom step, she paused once more, glancing back. Her daughter remained at the door, her hands still on the edge, her body half shadowed by the dim interior. The gift lay between them, waiting. And though the door had not closed, it had not opened either. She walked back to the car, her steps steady, though her hands shook. The engine roared softly to life, but she lingered in the driver's seat, staring at the porch in the rearview mirror. The gift remained there, a silent bridge, fragile and uncertain. The threshold had held her. Whether it would hold them both, together or keep them apart, she could not yet know. She drove home with the image fixed in her mind, the gift resting on the welcome mat, the door half open, her daughter framed by the shadows inside. The miles slipped past without memory. By the time she parked in her own driveway, the details of the road had vanished. What remained was the ache of leaving something behind, not knowing if it would be received on inside the house. The silence met her again. She placed her keys on the counter, hung her cardigan on the chair, and stood in the center of the room with her arms limped at her sides. The gift was gone from her hands, but its absence was heavier than its weight had ever been. She paced the kitchen once, then again. Each step felt restless, unfinished. She imagined the scene still unfolding at her daughter's doorstep, the gift sitting there, untouched, the ribbon catching light, the faint sounds of movement from within the house. Did her daughter pick it up immediately, closing the door before the neighbors could see? Or did she leave it there, an unwanted symbol pressed between family and pride? The questions gnawed at her, yet no answers came. She reached for her phone, more than once, lifting it from the counter only to set it back down. Calling would only widen the distance. Texting would feel like intrusion, so she did nothing. Evening fell, shadows stretching long across her walls. She sat on the couch, staring at the empty spot where the gift had rested for weeks. The closet door gaped slightly open, as though mocking her. There was nothing left inside to hold. Night deepened. She tried to sleep, but her body resisted. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the doorstep again, the package waiting like a question left unanswered. Her daughter's face lingered, too tired, stern, unreadable. She shifted beneath her blankets, but comfort would not come by morning. Exhaustion pressed down heavier than rest. She made coffee, though she barely touched it. She sat at the kitchen table, her hands folded, her gaze fixed on the phone lying flat before her. It remained silent, blank, its screen dark. She checked the signal once, twice, though she knew it was fine. The silence came not from the device, but from the space between them. In the days that followed, nothing changed. She carried out her routines, but each action felt thinner, stripped of meaning. She thought often of the gift, picturing it in endless states, opened, unopened, discarded, placed gently on a shelf. The not knowing was worse than any truth. Neighbors waved when they passed her yard, their smiles polite, unaware. Relatives called, their voices warm but careful, avoiding the subject. They all carried. She listened, she replied, but her mind wandered always back to the doorstep, to the unopened gift, and the silence that still held it. One afternoon, her sister called. Her voice was calm, steady. "She hasn't opened it," she said softly, without needing to explain. "It's still there, sitting on the counter." She moves around it, but she hasn't touched it. The words sank deep, heavier than she expected. Relief mingled with pain. The gift had been taken inside, but not received. Not yet. It stood in her daughter's home, the way she herself stood outside it, present. Visible, but unwelcome. She thanked her sister, though her voice was faint. After the call ended, she sat in the quiet for a long time, her hands pressed together as though in prayer. The gift remained unopened. It was a symbol now, larger than ribbon and paper. It carried the weight of years, the distance of silence, the fragile hope that one day, when ready, her daughter might reach for it. Until then, she could only wait. And waiting, she realized, was its own kind of love. The unopened gift lingered in her daughter's house like a shadow that could not be swept away. Days stretched into weeks, each one carrying the same unspoken weight. Her sister's call had confirmed what she feared, that the box sat on the counter, untouched, a silent witness to their fracture. Knowing it was there but not welcomed felt like standing outside a locked room, hearing footsteps within, but never being invited in. She lived in waiting now. Each morning began with a glance at her phone. Each night ended with the same. The screen stayed dark. No messages, no calls. Sometimes she whispered aloud in her kitchen, her voice trembling. "Just open it, please." The words went nowhere, swallowed by the walls, by the silence she had come to know as her constant companion. Her body carried the strain of waiting. Sleep came restless, shallow. Meals went unfinished. She busied her hands with small chores, scrubbing floors already clean, folding laundry twice, tending plants that didn't need it. Nothing filled the emptiness. Every task ended with her staring at the space on the shelf, where the gift had once rested, imagining it still wrapped, still sealed. Then came the call she had not expected. It was not her daughter's voice. It was her sister's again, firmer this time, tinged with frustration. "She won't open it. I told her she should. I told her maybe it's time. She just shakes her head. Says she's not ready. Says it's not about the gift at all." The words stung, though she knew they were true. It had never been just about the box. It was about years of silence, about pride and hurt, about the sharp text that had pushed her away and the decades of smaller wounds that had come before it. The gift was only the symbol, the object that carried everything unspoken. That night she sat at her table, the lamplight dim, her hands clenched. A storm churned inside her, a mix of anger, sorrow, and desperation. She wanted to march to her daughter's house, to tear open the box herself, to demand she look at what was inside. But she knew that would only push her further. She had spent a lifetime learning when to speak and when to hold back, and now, she felt trapped between the two, suffocating in the middle ground. The breaking point did not come with shouting. It came in a quieter form, the way so many fractures do. She found herself one afternoon holding her phone, her thumb hovering above the screen. Her breath shook, her chest tightened. She typed slowly, each word heavy. "If you don't want the gift, throw it away. But don't leave it unopened, please." She stared at the message for a long time. Her thumb trembled above the button. Then she erased it. The silence remained. Her daughter, across the city, stood in her kitchen too, the unopened box still on the counter. She looked at it daily now, sometimes brushing past it, sometimes pausing to run her fingers over the ribbon. She told herself she wasn't ready, that opening it meant acknowledging something she didn't want to face. But the truth pressed against her harder each day. Leaving it sealed was a choice too, and one that hurt them both. And so, both women stood at their own breaking points, one with her finger over the send button, the other with her hand hovering above the ribbon. Neither moved. Neither could. The box remained unopened. The silence deepened, and somewhere in that silence, something had to give. The morning came without intention, as most changes do. Her daughter stood in the kitchen, the light falling pale through the blinds, her hands resting on the edge of the counter. The box sat where it always had, its ribbon dulled from weeks of waiting, its corners softened by the brush of passing arms. It no longer looked like a present. It looked like something heavier, an artifact of silence. A weight no one had dared lift. She stared at it the way one stares at a locked door, debating if the risk of opening was worse than the pain of not knowing. For weeks, she had told herself she wasn't ready, that leaving it closed was safer, cleaner. But today, something shifted. Maybe it was the way the morning light hit the ribbon. Maybe it was the silence that pressed too hard against her chest. Maybe it was the memory of her mother's face at the doorstep, lined quiet, steady. Whatever it was, her hand reached forward before her mind could stop it. Her fingers brushed the ribbon. The texture was familiar, too familiar. and it broke something in her resolve. She pulled, slow at first, then firmer, until the bow unraveled. The ribbon fell against the counter with a soft hiss, leaving only the paper. She paused, her breath catching. Then she tore it open. The box revealed a smaller bundle, wrapped again, but this time in something old cloth. Carefully folded, she lifted it gently, the fabric worn but clean, and when it unfolded she saw the truth. It was a blanket. Not bought, not from a store, but made. Each square was different, stitched from fabric she recognized, a scrap of her childhood dress, the faded corner of a shirt her father once wore, pieces of curtains that had hung in their old kitchen. Her mother had kept them all, quietly, patiently, sewing them into something whole. She pressed her hand to it, the texture uneven, the stitches imperfect but deliberate. Her throat tightened. Tears pricked her eyes before she could stop them. This was not just a gift. It was a record, a collection of their lives held together by thread. Every piece carried memory. Every piece carried love. Her hand trembled as she lifted it fully from the box. She laid it across her arms, the weight of it heavier than she expected. It smelled faintly of lavender, of soap, of home. She closed her eyes, the ache in her chest breaking open into something she could no longer contain. Her phone sat on the table nearby. For weeks she had ignored it, silenced it, used it only for necessary words. Now she picked it up with hands, still trembling. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the name she had avoided. Mom. Her thumb hovered. She did not know what she would say, if words would even come. But she pressed it anyway. The line rang once, twice. Across the city, her mother sat in her own kitchen, staring at the same phone she had whispered to so many times. When it rang, she froze. The sound felt unreal, too sudden, too impossible. Her hand shook as she lifted it, pressing it slowly to her ear. Neither spoke at first. The silence carried across the line, heavy but no longer empty. Finally, her daughter's voice broke through, unsteady, soft. I opened it. Her mother's breath caught. For a moment she couldn't answer. Then, with a voice as quiet as the stitches that had held the blanket together, she said, I'm glad. The silence that followed was not the silence of distance. It was the silence of recognition, of something broken beginning slowly, carefully to mend.